They thought they had broken her. They thought taking her car, her home, and her dignity was the end of the story. In the high-stakes world of Manhattan divorce court, silence is usually a sign of defeat. But when Audrey stood before Judge Holloway, wearing a thrift store coat and clutching a plastic bag of documents, the room was filled with the mocking laughter of her ex-husband and his wealthy family. They were celebrating her ruin. They were celebrating too early. Because 5 minutes later, when the judge adjusted his glasses and read her birth name into the record, the laughter didn't just stop. It died, and the fear began. This is the story of how the invisible woman became the most powerful person in the room. The conference room on the 42nd floor of Blackwood Sterling and Associates smelled of old money and lemon polish. It was a scent designed to intimidate, much like the view of the Manhattan skyline that stretched out behind the massive mahogany table. Audrey sat on the side of the table facing the window, meaning the glare of the afternoon sun hit her directly in the eyes. She knew this wasn't an accident. Nothing the Sterling family did was ever an accident. She wore a grey wool coat that had seen better days, the elbows thinning, the hem slightly frayed. Underneath a simple white blouse from a discount rack, her hands resting on the table were bare. The diamond ring, a 3-carat solitaire Derek had given her 3 years ago, was already gone. He had demanded it back the moment he served her the papers, claiming it was a family heirloom she had never truly earned. Across from her sat the tribunal of her misery. Derek Sterling, her husband of 3 years, looked as dashing as ever. He wore a navy bespoke suit, his hair swept back with the casual arrogance of a man who had never been told no in his 32 years. Beside him was his mother, Patricia Sterling. Patricia was a woman made of steel and Botox, her face frozen in a perpetual expression of disdain. She was currently picking a piece of invisible lint off her Chanel blazer, refusing to even look at Audrey. And then there was their lawyer, Bradford C. Miles, the shark of Park Avenue. He was a man who didn't just win cases, he annihilated the opposition. "Let's make this simple, shall we?" Bradford said, his voice smooth and oily. He slid a single document across the polished wood. It stopped inches from Audrey's hands. "This is the final offer. It's generous, frankly. More than you deserve, considering the distinct lack of contribution you made to the marital assets." Audrey looked down at the paper. The number was pathetic. $5,000. A relocation fee, they called it. In exchange, she had to sign a non-disclosure agreement that would silence her for the rest of her life. She couldn't talk about the marriage, the Sterling family business, or the real reason Derek was casting her aside. "I can't sign this," Audrey said softly. Her voice was steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Patricia finally looked up. Her eyes were cold, hard blue chips. "You can't, or you won't. I have nothing." "Patricia," Audrey said. "Derek emptied the joint account. He cancelled my credit cards. You evicted me from the brownstone yesterday. I slept in a motel in Queens last night. $5,000 doesn't even cover my student loans, let alone start a new life." Derek let out a short, sharp laugh. He leaned back, checking his Rolex. "Audrey, come on. Don't play the victim. You were a barista when I found you. You were serving lattes and living in a studio apartment the size of this table. I gave you 3 years of luxury. First-class flights, galas, the Hamptons. You lived a fantasy. Now the ride is over. Take the cash and go back to the coffee shop." "We know about your debt, Audrey," Bradford added, tapping a folder in front of him. "We ran a full financial forensic sweep on you. You're drowning. You have no family to bail you out. Your parents passed when you were young, you have no siblings, and your current bank balance is, let me see here, $42.16. The humiliation burned Audrey's cheeks. It was true. She had cut ties with her past life completely when she met Derek, wanting to be loved for who she was, not what she came from. She had told Derek she was an orphan from the Midwest with no connections. She wanted a simple life. She never expected that her simplicity would be weaponized against her. "I'm not asking for millions, Derek," Audrey said, ignoring the lawyer. "I'm asking for what is fair. I supported you when your startup was failing. I worked the phones. I managed the books for Sterling Tech for the first 18 months unpaid, so you could show a profit to investors. I earned a share of that company." Patricia slammed her hand on the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "You earned nothing," Patricia hissed. "You were a placeholder, a pretty face Derek picked up because he was going through a rebellious phase. But now he's ready to marry a woman of actual substance. Jessica Van Doren comes from a real family. She brings capital to the merger. You bring nothing but cheap shoes and a sad story." Jessica, Audrey repeated the name. The woman Derek had been sleeping with for 6 months. "So she's the one funding the new expansion. That's why you're discarding me now." "It's business, Audrey," Derek said, shrugging. "And romance, of course. Jessica gets me. She understands our world. You never did. You were always uncomfortable, too polite to the staff, too quiet at dinners. You never fit the Sterling brand." Bradford clicked his pen. "The offer expires in 10 minutes. If you don't sign, we go to court tomorrow. And I promise you, Ms. Hart, if we go to court, I will bury you in legal fees so deep you'll be paying us until you're 80. We will sue you for defamation, for emotional distress, for the theft of the family heirloom ring, which we will claim you stole." "I didn't steal it." "Derek took it," Audrey cried out, her composure slipping. "It's your word against the Sterlings." Bradford smiled, a predator showing his teeth. "And in this city the Sterling name is the law. Who is a judge going to believe the pillars of New York society or the penniless waitress with $40 to her name?" They laughed. It started with Derek, a chuckle of disbelief that she was still resisting. Then Patricia joined in a high-pitched, cruel sound. Even the lawyer smirked. They looked at her like she was a bug they had already crushed, and she just hadn't realized she was dead yet. Audrey looked at the three of them. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of lemon and arrogance. She reached into her worn tote bag. "I won't sign," she said, her voice dropping an octave. It wasn't a plea anymore. It was a statement. "I'll see you in court." Derek stopped laughing. He looked annoyed. "Fine. Have it your way. Enjoy being homeless, Audrey." Audrey stood up. She didn't look back as she walked to the heavy oak doors. As she pushed them open, she heard Patricia's voice one last time. "Make sure she takes the service elevator, Bradford. We don't want clients seeing her looking like that in the lobby." The next morning, the sky over New York was a bruised purple threatening rain. Inside the Honorable Judge Lawrence P. Halloway's courtroom, the atmosphere was even stormier. This wasn't a trial yet. It was a preliminary hearing regarding the emergency motion regarding assets and spousal support. But because the Sterlings were involved, the courtroom was packed. Reporters were jammed into the back benches, hungry for the scandal. Tech mogul dumps waitress, wife for heiress. It was the headline of the week. Derek and Patricia sat at the plaintiff's table, looking like royalty in exile. Derek was whispering to Jessica Van Doren, who had boldly shown up to support him. Jessica was blonde, statuesque, and wearing a white suit that cost more than Audrey's entire existence over the last 3 years. Audrey sat alone at the defendant's table. Well, not entirely alone. Sitting next to her was a man who looked like he had slept in his car. His suit was rumpled, his tie was loose, and he was currently shuffling through a stack of disorganized papers. This was Sam Miller. He was a court-appointed representative Audrey had qualified for due to her lack of income. Bradford C. Miles, standing tall at the Sterling table, looked at Sam Miller and practically salivated. It was going to be a slaughter. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. "Judge Lawrence P." Holloway entered. He was a man in his 60s, with a reputation for zero tolerance for theatrics. He adjusted his robes and sat down, peering over his spectacles at the assembly. "Docket number 4492, the clerk announced. "Sterling versus Sterling." Judge Holloway opened the file. "All right, I've reviewed the motions. Mr. Miles, you are representing the petitioner, Mr. Derek Sterling. And," he squinted at the defense table, "Mr. Miller, you are with the respondent, Mrs. Audrey Sterling." "Audrey Hart, Your Honor," Sam Miller said, standing up. His voice was surprisingly deep and clear, contrasting with his disheveled appearance. "My client has reverted to her maiden name, effective immediately." "Very well." The judge nodded. "Mr. Miles, you've filed a motion to dismiss any claim to spousal support. We have your honor." Bradford Miles strode to the center of the room, playing to the cameras at the back. "This marriage was short-term, 3 years. The respondent brought 0 assets into the union. She made 0 financial contribution. In fact, she was a drain on my client's resources. Mr. Sterling attempted to offer a settlement which was refused. We are arguing that Ms. Hart is attempting to extort the Sterling family for money she did not earn." Derek nodded solemnly from his seat. Patricia patted his arm, looking like a grieving mother. "Extortion is a strong word, Counselor," Judge Holloway said dryly. "It fits your honor." Bradford continued. "Ms. Hart is destitute. We have evidence she has substantial premarital debt. She sees Mr. Sterling as a lottery ticket. We are asking the court to enforce the separation of assets immediately, so my client can move on with his life and his business partners without this leeching attachment." A ripple of snickers went through the gallery. The phrase, leeching attachment, hung in the air. The judge turned to the defense table. "Miss Miller, do you have a response?" Sam Miller stood up. He didn't stride to the center. He stayed by Audrey's side. "Your Honor," Sam said, "Mr. Miles has painted a very vivid picture, but it is entirely fiction. The defense asserts that the Sterling tech boom of 2021 was largely due to the algorithms written and optimized by my client, Ms. Hart, in the Home Office, while Mr. Sterling was out networking." Derek scoffed loud enough for the microphone to catch it. "She barely knows how to use an iPhone. She's a barista." "Order," Judge Holloway warned. "Furthermore," Sam continued unbothered, "we are not asking for a settlement. Your Honor, we are asking for a full audit of the Sterling family financials, specifically regarding offshore accounts in the Caymans, where marital assets were hidden 3 weeks prior to the divorce filing." Bradford Miles laughed. It was a loud, theatrical laugh. "Your Honor, this is absurd, a fishing expedition by a desperate woman. Hidden accounts. Algorithms. This is fantasy. Ms. Hart is a high school graduate with no technical background. She has no money to even pay for this audit." Bradford turned to look directly at Audrey. "She walked into this courtroom with shoes held together by glue, Let's stop pretending she is anything other than what she is, a gold digger who got caught." The courtroom murmured in agreement. It was brutal. It was effective. Derek was grinning. "Is that all, Mr. Miles?" Judge Halloway asked, his face unreadable. "Yes, Your Honor. We ask you to grant the motion, dismiss her claims, and order her to pay our legal fees." Judge Halloway looked down at the paperwork in front of him. He flipped a page, then another. He stopped. His eyebrows shot up. He adjusted his glasses and leaned closer to the document. The room went silent. The judge's behavior had shifted. He wasn't looking at the motions anymore. He was looking at a sealed envelope that had been submitted by the defense that morning. "Mr. Miller," the judge said, his voice sounding different, tighter. "You submitted this supplementary evidence regarding your client's identity." "I did, Your Honor," Sam Miller said. "It pertains to the accusation that my client is destitute and motivated by greed." Judge Halloway looked up. He looked at Derek Sterling. Then he looked at Patricia. Then finally his gaze landed on Audrey. It wasn't a look of pity anymore. It was a look of profound shock bordering on reverence. "Mr. Miles," the judge said quietly, "you stated for the record that the respondent is penniless. She has $40, Your Honor." Bradford scoffed. "And you stated she has no family connections, no standing. None. She's a nobody." Judge Halloway took a deep breath. He picked up the piece of paper from the sealed envelope. "It seems, Mr. Miles, that your background check was incomplete." The judge cleared his throat. He spoke into the microphone, and his voice boomed through the courtroom. "The court acknowledges the true identity of the respondent. She is not merely Audrey Hart. According to the birth certificate and trust fund deeds unsealed this morning, the respondent is Audrey Kensington Hart." The silence in the room was sudden and absolute. It was a vacuum. "Kensington," Derek whispered, the smile sliding off his face like distinct slime. "As in the Kensington Hotel Group." Patricia's face went pale beneath her makeup. "The Kensington Steel Empire." The sole heiress, Judge Halloway, read on, "to the Archibald Compton Kensington estate. Estimated net worth of the trust." The judge paused as if he couldn't believe the number. $4.2 billion. Audrey stood up slowly. She wasn't the small, broken woman from the day before. She smoothed her worn coat, but now it didn't look like poverty. It looked like eccentricity. It looked like old money that didn't need to shout. She looked directly at Derek, whose mouth was hanging open. "I didn't want your money, Derek," Audrey said, her voice carrying through the silent room without a microphone. "I have enough of my own. I just wanted to see if you loved me without it." She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I would like to buy Sterling Tech. I believe my husband's company is currently valued at $12 million. I'll write a check today. I want to dissolve it." The silence in courtroom 4B was heavy, suffocating. It was the kind of silence that usually follows a bomb blast, where the dust hangs in the air and everyone checks to see if they still have their limbs. Bradford C. Miles, the shark of Park Avenue, opened his mouth. Then he closed it. For the first time in his 20-year career, his legal mind, usually a meticulously organized filing cabinet of statutes and loopholes, was a blank whiteboard. "Kensington," he croaked. It was a weak sound, stripped of all its oily confidence. Judge Halloway peered over his glasses, his expression stern, but his eyes twinkling with a justice he rarely got to dispense. "Do you require me to spell it Mr. Miles K-E-N?" "No." "Your Honor," Bradford managed. He looked at the documents in the judge's hand as if they were radioactive. "But This must be a fabrication, a forgery. The respondent, she worked at a coffee shop. She lived in a walk-up, the financial forensic sweep. The sweep only looked for accounts under the name Audrey Hart. Sam Miller interrupted. He was leaning back in his chair now, the rumpled suit suddenly looking less like a sign of poverty and more like the eccentric affectation of a genius. The Kensington Trust is private. It doesn't show up on credit checks. It doesn't exist on the internet. It sits in vaults that predate the Federal Reserve. Derek Sterling was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were white. He turned his head slowly toward Audrey, like a rusty machine. "Audrey," he whispered, Is this a joke?" Audrey didn't look at him. She was looking at Jessica Van Doren. Jessica, the heiress to the Van Doren shipping fortune, was a woman who knew the hierarchy of wealth better than anyone. The Sterlings were new money, tech money, flashy and volatile. The Van Dorens were old money. But the Kensingtons were mythical money. They were the architects of the American Industrial Revolution. They were the people who loaned money to governments. Jessica's face had drained of all color. She physically recoiled, inching her chair away from Derek, as if he were contagious. "You told me she was trash," Jessica hissed at Derek, her voice cutting through the silence. "You said she was a nobody from Ohio." "I thought she was," Derek pleaded, panic rising in his chest. "She told me she was an orphan." "I am an orphan," Audrey said calmly. Her voice was cool water on a hot skillet. "My parents died in a plane crash when I was 12. That part was true. And because of that, I was raised by trustees, lawyers, and board members. I spent my entire adolescence wondering if people liked me, or if they just liked the potential of my signature." She finally turned to look at Derek. Her eyes were dry. The tears she had shed the night before in the Queen's Motel were the last she would ever shed for him. "When I met you, Derek, I thought I had finally found it. Someone who didn't know the name. Someone who fell in love with the girl who spilled espresso on his shirt. I wanted to build something with you, from the ground up. I wanted to be partners." She gestured to the fancy suit he wore, the watch, the arrogance. "I helped you build Sterling Tech. I stayed up late coding while you slept. I balanced the books. I let you take the credit because I didn't care about the glory. I cared about us." She paused, letting the weight of the past land on him. "But the moment the money started coming in, you changed. You didn't want a partner anymore. You wanted an accessory, and when you thought I was holding you back from the big league, you threw me away like garbage." "Audrey, baby," Derek stammered, standing up. "I didn't. I was confused. The stress of the merger. You know how I get." "Sit down, Mr. Sterling," Judge Halloway barked, slamming his gavel. Derek collapsed back into his chair. Patricia Sterling, who had been catatonic, suddenly snapped to life. Her brain, hardwired for social survival, was frantically recalculating. The realization that she had been treating a Kensington like a servant for 3 years was causing a system failure behind her Botoxed forehead. "Your Honor," Patricia said, her voice trembling with a fake sweetness that was nauseating. "Clearly there has been a massive misunderstanding, a breakdown in communication. If my daughter-in-law, if Audrey had just been honest with us." "Honest?" Audrey laughed. It was a sharp, dangerous sound. "Patricia, last week you told me I wasn't cultured enough to attend the charity gala. You told the housekeeper to check my bags when I moved out to make sure I didn't steal the silverware." Patricia flushed a deep, blotchy red. "Now," Audrey continued, turning back to the judge, "regarding the motion to dismiss spousal support, Mr. Miller," Sam Miller stood up, Your Honor, Ms. Kensington Hart withdraws her request for spousal support. She doesn't need Mr. Sterling's money. In fact, she finds it rather quaint. Motion withdrawn, Judge Halloway said, hiding a smile. However, Sam continued, we are filing a counter-motion. As Ms. Kensington Hart mentioned, she intends to purchase Sterling Tech, but not for $12 million. Sam picked up a document from his messy pile. We have evidence provided by my client's rather extensive private investigation team that Mr. Sterling used Audrey's original code as the backbone for his new software suite, the one he is currently pitching to investors. That code is intellectual property of Audrey Kensington Hart. It was written before the marriage on her personal laptop. Bradford Miles looked like he was going to be sick. That's unproven. We have the timestamps, Sam said. We have the original source code, which means essentially Sterling Tech is built on stolen property. We can shut you down with an injunction by lunch. Derek looked at Bradford. Can they do that? Bradford didn't answer. He was too busy packing his briefcase. He knew a sinking ship when he saw one. Or, Sam said, looking at his fingernails, Mr. Sterling can sell. Today, right now, for the evaluation of the company, minus the projected legal costs of fighting a Kensington in court. Sam smiled at Derek. I'll save you the math. You owe her money. Judge Halloway looked at the clock. I'm going to call a recess. I suggest the two parties converse. And Mr. Sterling, I suggest you listen very carefully to what your wife has to say. The hallway outside the courtroom was a frenzy. The reporters who had been half asleep expecting a boring divorce hearing had been tipped off. Text messages had flown out of the courtroom the moment the name Kensington was read. Billionaire heiress in disguise. Sterling divorce bombshell. When the double doors opened, a wall of flash bulbs went off. But for the first time in Derek Sterling's life, the cameras weren't pointing at him. They were pointing past him. Derek, Patricia, and Jessica stumbled out first, blinded by the lights. Mr. Sterling, is it true your wife owns the Kensington estate? Patricia, did you really evict a billionaire from your brownstone? Jessica, are you staying with Derek now that he's arguably the poorer party? Jessica Van Doren didn't even stop. She pushed past a cameraman, her heels clicking furiously on the marble floor. Jessica, Derek called out, reaching for her arm. Jess, wait, we can fix this. Jessica spun around, her face twisted in disgust. Fix what, Derek? You're a fraud. You pitched me a merger based on tech you stole from your wife. My father will blacklist you by noon. Do not call me. She stormed off toward the elevators, leaving Derek standing alone in the crowd. Then the doors opened again. Audrey walked out. She hadn't changed her clothes, she was still in the wool coat and discount blouse, but the way the light hit her seemed different now. She walked with the easy, terrifying confidence of someone who owns the building. Sam Miller walked beside her, acting as a human shield against the press. Ms. Kensington, why the disguise? Are you going to destroy Sterling Tech? Audrey didn't answer the reporters. She stopped in the middle of the hallway, directly in front of Derek and his mother. The cameras went silent, sensing the confrontation. Patricia Sterling decided to attempt a Hail Mary. She stepped forward, tears welling in her eyes, an impressive feat of acting. Audrey. She choked out, reaching for Audrey's hands. Audrey didn't pull away, but she didn't reciprocate. She just let her hands hang there, limp and cold. Audrey, darling, you have to understand. We were just trying to protect Derek. Mothers can be so overprotective. But we've always loved you. Your family. Audrey looked down at Patricia's manicured hands gripping her own. Family, Audrey repeated. Patricia, do you remember my birthday last year? Patricia blinked. Of course. We sent flowers. You sent a text, Audrey corrected. And then you asked me to come over and polish the silver for your dinner party because the maid was sick. You told the guests I was the help because you were embarrassed to introduce me as Derek's wife. A gasp went through the circle of reporters. Patricia released Audrey's hands as if they burned. And you, Derek? Audrey turned to her husband. Derek straightened his tie, trying to regain some shred of dignity. Look, Audrey, you played a good game. You tricked us. Congratulations. But don't act like you're innocent. You lied to me for 3 years. That's grounds for annulment. Fraud. I didn't lie, Audrey said. I omitted, and I did it to protect myself from exactly this. She swept her hand around, gesturing to the greed in his eyes. I gave you every chance, Derek. Last night in that conference room, I begged you for fairness. I begged you for $5,000 to pay my student loans I took out on purpose to build credit for our life together. She took a step closer. I asked for mercy. You gave me mockery. You laughed at me. It was a negotiation tactic, Derek argued. It's business. Exactly. Audrey smiled. It's business, and I'm about to acquire yours. Sam Miller stepped forward, handing a thick envelope to Derek. What is this? Derek asked. An offer, Sam said. For Sterling Tech. We're offering $1. $1, Derek scoffed. You're insane. The IP alone is worth millions. The IP belongs to Audrey, Sam reminded him. If you don't sell for $1, we sue for copyright infringement, theft of intellectual property, and fraud. We will freeze your assets. We will subpoena every email you've ever sent. We will drag this out until Sterling Tech is nothing but a cautionary tale in a business textbook. Or you take the dollar you sign over the company and you walk away debt-free. Well, mostly debt-free. You still have to pay your own lawyer. Derek looked at Bradford Miles. Bradford was busy checking his phone, looking remarkably uninterested in defending his client now that the retainer check looked dubious. Take the dollar, Derek, Bradford muttered. What? Derek stared at him. She has the source code, you idiot. If she sues, you lose everything, including your reputation. Take the dollar and run. Derek looked at the envelope. He looked at the cameras recording his humiliation. He looked at Audrey, who was watching him with a gaze that was neither hateful nor loving. It was simply indifferent. He snatched the pen from Sam's pocket. He scribbled his signature on the document against the wall. There, Derek spat, throwing the paper at Audrey. Take it. It's a failing company anyway. It won't be for long, Audrey said, catching the paper. She turned to walk away. Wait, Patricia cried out. Audrey, what about the brownstone? You know technically the deed was in the company name for tax purposes. Audrey stopped. She looked back over her shoulder. Oh, that's right, Audrey said, feigning surprise. Since I just bought the company, I suppose I own the brownstone now, too. Patricia's hand went to her throat. But that's my home. I've lived there for 20 years. Audrey's face hardened. I know. It's a beautiful house. I think I'll turn it into a shelter for women who have been discarded by their families. She checked her watch, a cheap plastic thing that she hadn't bothered to replace yet. You have 24 hours to vacate Patricia. I'd suggest you take the service elevator. We wouldn't want the neighbors seeing you look like that. With that, Audrey Kensington Hart walked out the front doors of the courthouse, A sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom was idling at the curb. A driver in full livery held the door open. Audrey stopped before getting in. She turned to Sam Miller. "Coming, Sam. We have a company to restructure." Sam grinned, loosening his tie. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, boss." They slid into the car. The door closed with a heavy, expensive thud, shutting out the noise of the world. As the car pulled away, the last thing the cameras caught was Derek Sterling, holding a $1 bill, standing in the rain. The elevator ride up to the penthouse offices of Sterling Tech was the longest 45 seconds of Arthur Pendleton's life. Arthur was the CFO, a man who prided himself on creative accounting. He was the one who had helped Derek siphon $3 million into a shell company in the Cayman Islands, just days before the divorce filing. He stood in the lobby, wringing his hands as the gold-plated elevator doors slid open. He expected Audrey to storm in, screaming. He expected a scene. Instead, silence walked out of the elevator. Audrey Kensington Hart stepped onto the plush carpet of the reception area. She had changed. The thrift store coat was gone, replaced by a tailored black blazer and trousers that screamed bespoke Italian tailoring. She wore no jewelry, except for a simple, terrifyingly expensive Patek Philippe watch. Behind her walked Sam Miller, who had traded his rumpled suit for something sharp and shark grey, and a team of 6 auditors from Deloitte. Mrs. Sterling, Ms. Kensington. The receptionist, a young woman named Chloe, who had once rolled her eyes at Audrey when she asked for water, stood up so fast she knocked over her chair. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." "I prefer to be ahead of schedule, Chloe," Audrey said, not breaking stride. "Assemble the executive team in the boardroom. 3 minutes." Audrey walked past the open-plan desks. The office, usually buzzing with the noise of tech bros playing ping-pong and shouting about crypto, was dead silent. Every head turned. They knew. The memo had gone out the moment Derek signed the paper. Their boss wasn't the guy on the magazine covers anymore. It was the woman who used to bring them donuts and who they had ignored at the Christmas party. Audrey pushed open the glass doors of the boardroom. The room still smelled of Derek's cologne, a heavy, musky scent that now just smelled like failure. She took the seat at the head of the table. Arthur Pendleton scurried in, followed by the VP of Sales and the HR director. They looked like students called to the principal's office. "Sit," Audrey said. They sat. "As you know," Audrey began her voice, calm and precise, "ownership of this company has changed hands. Derek Sterling is no longer associated with this entity. Effective immediately, we are rebranding. Sterling Tech is dead. We are now Kensington Solutions." She slid a folder across the table to Arthur. "Arthur, I've reviewed the books." Arthur sweat through his collar. "Ms. Kensington, I can explain. The Cayman transfers were standard tax optimization strategies instructed by Mr. Sterling. I was merely following orders." "Stop," Audrey said. She didn't raise her voice. She just held up a hand. "You moved marital assets into a shell corporation called Blue Horizon Holdings. You thought it was untraceable." Arthur nodded nervously. "It is. It's a very secure jurisdiction." Audrey leaned forward, a small, cold smile playing on her lips. "Arthur, who do you think owns the majority stake in the bank that manages Blue Horizon Holdings?" Arthur blinked. I don't know. A holding firm." "The Kensington Group," Audrey said softly. "You tried to hide my money in my own bank." The color drained from Arthur's face so completely He looked like a corpse. "You're fired," Audrey said. "And you're being investigated by the SEC for fraud. The auditors behind me are here to escort you out. Leave your laptop." Arthur was pulled out of his chair by 2 burly security guards. He didn't even fight. He was too busy hyperventilating. Audrey turned to the HR director, a woman named Linda, who had once told Audrey she didn't fit the corporate image when Audrey asked to help with recruiting. "Linda," Audrey said, "do you remember telling me that I lacked the pedigree to represent this company?" Linda swallowed hard. "Audrey, Ms. Kensington, I was under pressure from Derek. He wanted a certain look." "I see," Audrey said. "Well, I have a new look in mind, competence. I've reviewed the employee files. We have 3 junior developers, Sarah, Mike, and David. They've been doing 90% of the coding, while the senior staff takes 3-hour lunches. As of today, they are the new department leads. You will process their raises, double their salaries, and then you will clear out your desk." "You're firing me," Linda gasped. "No," Audrey corrected. "I'm letting you go because you don't fit the corporate image. We value kindness here." Audrey stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. She looked out at the city. She could see the park where she used to walk alone while Derek was at parties. "Sam," she said, not turning around. "Yes, boss?" Sam asked, grinning from the side of the room. "Get me the legal team. I want to file a patent for the algorithm Derek stole. And then I want to start the charity foundation. We're going to turn the Sterling family brownstone into the best women's shelter in Manhattan." "Consider it done," Sam said. Audrey pressed her hand against the cool glass. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was the storm. 6 months later. The Pierre Hotel on 5th Avenue was glowing. A line of limousines stretched down the block, depositing the elite of New York society onto the red carpet. It was the annual Tech for Tomorrow Gala, the most exclusive ticket of the season. And the host was Audrey Kensington. She stood at the top of the grand staircase, looking like a queen. She wore a gown of midnight blue silk that shimmered like the night sky. Her hair was swept up, revealing diamond earrings that were actual Kensington heirlooms, not the cheap baubles Derek used to buy her to show off. She was laughing with the mayor of New York and the CEO of Google. She was radiant. Standing outside the velvet ropes in the cold November wind was a man in a rented tuxedo. Derek Sterling looked older. His tan had faded into a sallow gray. His hair was thinning. He hadn't worked in 6 months. No one would hire him. The Tech Genius brand was toxic. The moment Audrey took back her code, Sterling Tech's old products stopped working. The clients sued. The investors fled. Derek had been left with nothing but the $1 bill he signed for. He had spent that dollar on a can of soda the day he lost everything. Now he needed to get back in. He needed to talk to her. He had convinced himself that she still loved him, that this was all just a test. A cruel, elaborate test, but a test nonetheless. If he could just remind her of the good times. "Name?" the bouncer asked a wall of muscle with an earpiece. "Derek Sterling," he said, trying to summon his old arrogance. "I'm on the list." The bouncer looked down at the clipboard. He didn't even flip the page. "Not on the list." "Check again," Derek snapped. "I'm her husband, ex-husband. Whatever. She wants to see me." "Sir, you need to step back," the bouncer said, bored. "Let him in." The voice came from behind the bouncer. It was Sam Miller. He looked dashing in a tuxedo, looking every bit the high-powered general counsel he now was. "Sam," Derek exclaimed, relief washing over him. "Buddy, tell this gorilla who I am." Sam looked at Derek with a mixture of pity and amusement. "He knows who you are, Derek. That's why you're not on the list. But Audrey said if you showed up to let you in. She has 5 minutes." Derek straightened his bow tie. "I knew it. She misses me." Sam didn't say anything. He just led Derek through the glittering ballroom. Derek's eyes darted around. He saw people who used to kiss his ring investors' friends, turning their backs on him as he passed. They whispered behind their champagne flutes. "Is that him? The one who dumped a billionaire? God, he looks desperate." Sam led him to a private balcony overlooking Central Park. Audrey was there, standing alone, holding a glass of sparkling water. She turned as the door clicked shut. "Hello, Derek," she said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was just distant, like she was talking to someone she met once at a bus stop years ago. "Audrey," Derek breathed. He walked toward her, arms open. "God, you look incredible. You did it. You really showed everyone." He stopped a few feet away, sensing the invisible wall between them. "I've been thinking about us, Audrey. Crazy, right? But I realized we were a team. You and me against the world. I know I made mistakes, big ones. I was blinded by the stress. But looking at you now, I see the woman I fell in love with." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He had pawned his watch to buy it. It was a modest ring. "I want to start over," Derek said, his voice trembling with practiced emotion. "No money, no contracts, just us. Let me prove I can be the man you deserve." Audrey looked at the ring. Then she looked at his face. She studied him like a scientist studying a bug under a microscope. "Derek," she said gently, "do you know why I let you in tonight?" "Because you still love me," he said quickly. "No," she said. The word was soft, but it hit him like a hammer. "I let you in because I wanted to make sure." "Sure of what?" "Sure that I felt nothing," she said. "For months I wondered if I was being too harsh, if maybe you were just a victim of circumstance. But standing here listening to you pitch me a relationship like it's a startup seeking a Series B round, I realized something." She took a sip of her water. "You don't love me, Derek. You never did. You love the light. When I was a waitress, you loved that I looked up to you. I was the mirror that reflected your own ego. Now that I'm the sun, you just want to stand in the warmth." "That's not true," Derek protested. "I've changed." "Have you?" Audrey asked. "Where is Jessica or the 3 other women you dated this month? I read the tabloids, Derek. You're looking for a lifeboat. I am not a lifeboat. I am the captain of my own ship." The balcony door opened. A tall man walked in. He was handsome, with kind eyes and a face that hadn't seen a scalpel. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing a dark suit, simple but elegant. "Audrey," the man said. "They're ready for your speech." Audrey's face lit up. It was a genuine smile, one Derek hadn't seen in years. "I'm coming, David," she said. She turned back to Derek. "Derek, this is David. He's the head of my charitable foundation. He used to be a social worker in the Bronx. He doesn't care about my last name. He cares about what I do with it." David extended a hand to Derek. "Nice to meet you." Derek stared at the hand. He didn't take it. "Go home, Derek," Audrey said, turning her back on him. "The service elevator is down the hall to the left. We wouldn't want the guests to see you." Sam Miller opened the door for her, and Audrey walked back into the light of the ballroom, taking David's arm. Derek stood alone on the dark balcony. The sound of applause erupted from inside, thunderous, adoring applause for Audrey. He looked over the railing at the city below. He was back where he started. No, he was lower. Because now he knew exactly what he had lost. He turned to leave, but Sam Miller was blocking the doorway. "One more thing, Derek," Sam said, handing him a validation ticket. "What's this what calls parking validation?" Sam smiled. "Audrey didn't want you to have to pay for the hour. She knows things are tight." Sam patted him on the shoulder and walked away, leaving Derek holding the little slip of paper. Derek crushed it in his fist. He walked to the service elevator, pressed the button, and waited for the slow, grinding descent to the bottom. 1 year later, the rain in Manhattan felt different to Derek Sterling. It didn't feel like a romantic backdrop for a power lunch anymore. It felt cold, wet, and relentless, soaking through the thin soles of his non-designer shoes. He pushed open the door to the Daily Grind, a frantic, steamy coffee shop in Midtown. He wasn't there to buy a latte. He tied on the green apron, the strings digging into his waist. "You're late, Sterling," the manager, a 20-year-old kid named Kyle, snapped. "Table 4 needs bussing, and the espresso machine is jammed again." "Fix it." "On it," Derek muttered. The irony was a physical weight in his chest. 3 years ago, he had laughed at Audrey for smelling like coffee beans. He had mocked her tired feet. He had called her work menial. Now the smell of roasted beans was permanently etched into his skin, a constant reminder of his fall. He moved to wipe down table 4. As he scrubbed at a sticky ring of syrup, the bell on the door chimed. A group of suits walked in, men in Italian wool checking their phones, laughing about stocks and mergers. Derek froze. He knew them. It was the venture capital team from Apex Partners. The same men Derek had pitched to 2 years ago. The same men who had toasted him at the yacht club. Derek pulled his cap down low, praying for invisibility. He turned his back, scrubbing the table furiously. "Hey, excuse me," one of the men called out. "Can we get this table wiped? It's still sticky." Derek flinched. He had no choice. He turned around, keeping his head down, mumbling, "Sorry, sir. Let me get a fresh rag." "Wait a second," the man said. The laughter stopped. Derek Sterling." Derek looked up. The humiliation was total. It burned hotter than the steam wand on the espresso machine. "Hello, Greg," Derek said, his voice raspy. "My God." Greg said, his eyes widening. He looked at the apron, the rag, the name tag that just said Derek. "I heard things went south after the Kensington incident. But I didn't realize. It's just temporary." Derek lied. A reflex. "I'm consulting. This is just research for a new franchise model I'm building." Greg exchanged a look with his colleagues. It was the look. The pity look. It was worse than hatred. "Right," Greg said awkwardly, patting his pockets. "Well, good luck with that, Derek, really." Greg dropped a $5 bill on the table. "For the trouble." They walked away, choosing a table on the other side of the room. Derek stared at the $5. It was the exact amount of the settlement offer he had tried to force Audrey to take. 5,000, then. $5 now. The universe, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor. Later that afternoon, the television in the corner of the shop was tuned to a local news channel. The volume was low, but the chyron at the bottom screamed in bright red letters. "Grand opening the Heart Foundation for Women. Billionaire Audrey Kensington converts historic sterling brownstone into state-of-the-art sanctuary. Derek stopped working. He stared at the screen. There was the house, his childhood home, the place where he had learned to look down on people. The heavy iron gates were open. The windows, once draped in heavy velvet to keep the world out, were wide open, filled with light. The camera cut to Audrey. She was standing on the front steps, cutting a ribbon. She looked older, wiser, and breathtakingly happy. She wasn't wearing the Kensington diamonds today. She was wearing a simple blazer, her arm linked with David the social worker. A reporter thrust a microphone at her. "Ms. Kensington, this building has been in the Sterling family for 3 generations. Is it strange to turn it into a shelter?" Audrey smiled at the camera, and for a second, Derek felt like she was looking right at him through the screen. "It's not strange," she said. "It's necessary. This house used to be a monument to exclusion. It was a place where image mattered more than humanity. Now it's a place where women who have been told they are nothing can remember that they are everything." The camera panned to the crowd, and there, standing at the very edge of the police barricade, was a woman in a trench coat holding a large fake Louis Vuitton bag filled with flyers. It was Patricia. She was shouting something, waving a flyer at the news crew, trying to get attention. She looked frantic, her hair frizzy, her face gaunt. She was trying to sell her consulting services for etiquette coaching. A security guard, one of the men Audrey had hired, gently stepped in front of Patricia, blocking her from the camera's view. He didn't push her. He just stood there, a solid wall of dignity shielding the event from her desperation. Audrey didn't even notice Patricia. She was too busy hugging a young woman who had just walked out of the shelter's doors, a woman who looked exactly like Audrey had looked 3 years ago, scared, broke, and hopeful. Derek watched Audrey hug the girl. He saw the genuine warmth in her eyes. "Sterling," Kyle shouted from the back. "Latte for pickup, move it." Derek looked at the screen one last time. He reached up and untied the apron. He dropped it on the floor. "Sterling, where are you going?" Derek didn't answer. He walked out the door into the rain. He left the $5 tip on the table. He didn't want it. He didn't want any of it. He walked toward the subway, vanishing into the grey wash of the city, finally understanding that he was just a ghost in someone else's story. 5 years passed. The world moved on as it always does. The scandal of the Sterling divorce faded from the tabloids, replaced by newer, louder gossip. Kensington Solutions became a global leader in ethical tech. They pioneered software that helped non-profits manage resources and connected food banks to grocery chains to eliminate waste. The company was profitable wildly so, but every year, Audrey donated 90% of her personal dividends to the Heart Foundation. Audrey sat in her office, the same office where she had fired Arthur Pendleton, but the glass walls were no longer intimidating. They were covered in children's drawings. She was reviewing the quarterly budget when her phone buzzed. It was a text from Sam Miller. "Did you see the obituary?" Audrey paused. She typed back, "No." A link appeared. It was a small notice in a local Jersey paper. Patricia Sterling, 64, passed away quietly in her sleep at the Shady Pines Assisted Living Facility. Survived by her son, Derek. Audrey stared at the phone. She waited for a surge of emotion. Anger, triumph, sadness. There was nothing. Just a quiet acknowledgement of a life spent chasing the wrong things. She looked out the window. Down below on the street, people were rushing home. Somewhere out there, Derek was reading this, too. She hoped for his sake he had found peace. She hoped he had found a life that was real, even if it was small. The door to her office opened. A little girl, 4 years old, with unruly curls, ran in. "Mommy, Daddy says it's time to go." Audrey put the phone down. She didn't lock the screen. She didn't dwell on the past. She spun her chair around and caught her daughter in her arms. "I'm coming," Audrey said, burying her face in the girl's hair. David stood in the doorway holding a diaper bag and smiling. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Kensington Hart?" "Actually," Audrey smiled, grabbing her coat. "Let's just go by Hart. The Kensington part is heavy. I like the Hart part better." "Hart it is," David said. Audrey walked out of the office, turning off the lights. The room went dark, but the city outside was shining. She didn't look back at the phone. She didn't look back at the empty desk. She walked toward the elevator holding her family's hands, leaving the ghosts on the 42nd floor where they belonged. She had walked out penniless once, and they had laughed. She walked out now with everything that mattered, and the only sound was the laughter of her daughter. And that is the story of Audrey Kensington. It's a powerful reminder that the person you mistreat today might be the person holding your future in their hands tomorrow. Derek and Patricia fell in love with a bank account, not a person, and in the end, they lost both. Audrey proved that dignity isn't something you buy. It's something you carry whether you're wearing a thrift store coat or a designer gown. What do you think? Did Derek deserve a second chance, or was his punishment fitting? And would you have been as merciful as Audrey, or would you have destroyed them completely? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please do me a huge favor. Hit that like button. It helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a twist. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you laugh at. You never know who they really are.